Brian, I don't know how we found each other. It was in the Twitterverse somewhere. And that's always really cool to make random connections there.
That was, yeah, we found each other on Twitter and we had a short conversation and here we are.
Yeah, and I don't even remember how we came into each other's sphere. I started a new Twitter account right when we started following each other. But I was wondering kind of recently, why am I following Brian? Because you were pretty active lately, right? And I'm really happy because when I saw the Peas in the Pod, I was like, all right, let me dig it. I'm sorry, Peas and Carrots podcast is let me dig into Brian a little bit here. He's a podcaster. And yeah, then that's where I really discovered your leadership, your writing on that. So it's one of these cool kind of random internet connections that end up being in a semi-real life now.
And you got this massive platform. I went and did a little research on you. Congratulations. I mean, I'm honored to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Brian, the honor's all mine, right? And I really appreciate those kind words. I've been building it for the better part of a year. It's part of a journey that I've been on. It's not what I've normally done, right? So yeah, this is a pretty big deal for me. And I really appreciate that. But I think you're doing something that's really remarkable in the leadership realm. I was just telling you how much I loved leadership endurance. And I was curious how you got into the whole leadership thing. Where does leadership start with Brian?
Oh, great question. There's a story about FDR that he came in, he was outside playing one day and he came inside and his mother said, Franklin, you need to stop telling all the other little kids what to do. And his response was, well, Mom, if I don't, they will not know what to do. And that kind of, I love that story because you can see then in his infancy, or even then, that he had leadership skills. For me, I mean, geez, I've pastored churches where I've led. I lead a radio organization now. So all that stuff requires leadership skills. And I have failed gloriously and I've been successful. And every day I fail at some stuff. Every day I'm successful at stuff. So, so for me, this whole leadership gig started way back when. I knew that I had some raw leadership DNA and I just wanted to kind of cultivate it.
Did that start in like a W-2 or some sort of work environment? Or you said you pastored a church, which is, an occupation as well, but where did it actually start? What were you doing?
Let's see. I'd say that it started when I was in high school, being the president of the class, helping to raise money to go on class trips, from there, going to college, and where I first pastored my first church and having to lead people. And that's one of the most difficult places to lead because the people usually in a church, they're all volunteers. So you have to inspire them to want to give of their time. They are not on a payroll to where you just say, hey, here's your schedule, here's what you do. So that's one of the most difficult. So I would say so you learn a lot about people and about how to inspire them and what makes them go. And so
that's really cool that you bring that example of pastoring a church, because number one, that's really topical for me. A part of me reaching out to you, I think, was I'm involved in a leadership group at our church led by our pastor. And, so leadership was very topical. So when I found you and your leadership topic, it was like, okay, thank you, Holy Spirit, right? It was just all lining up. And my experience in leadership was not in high school. It was not before that. I always knew that I was, we call it entrepreneurial or outgoing. I never really saw leadership in me until I saw it in somebody else, or maybe until somebody saw it in me. It was my first job out of college. But what kind of relates to your pastoring example is that I was leading people and I was a young guy, and they were all 100% commission salespeople. Not the same as volunteer, but I couldn't tell them anything to do. They were contractors, right? I couldn't give them orders. I couldn't ask them to do anything. I could ask them to do things. I had to have conversations. I had to, work with them rather than have them work for me. Is just a natural way of doing things. So, yeah, that's pretty cool, because I've always thought about that as a competitive advantage for myself, right? It gave me a good taste of good leadership in the beginning, because if you get under a bad leader in a bad leadership situation and you learn to be the opposite of, we'll say in general is a servant leader, you're probably going to spin a little bit if once you get out of that group, right? Or if you suddenly lose favor in that group. But yeah, it's really important people are essential to leadership.
Yeah, they're everything. I'd also say this, because you talked about whenever I was in high school, college, I worked at a seminary. You'd always see these executive conversations going on. And one of the executives would come down and have a private conversation off the side with some people. And I was always like, I want to be in that conversation. What is being said? And what information are they getting that will help them make better decisions? And because they know more than what I do. So I wanted to strive to be in those conversations because I wanted to have the information that they had so I could make better decisions. So that was always something for me. Not that I wanted to be at the cool kids table, because leadership isn't being at the cool kids table, because really you're supposed to be serving everybody. But really it's about having the information and dispensing it so that you can inspire people to go do great things.
You said dispense. Let's talk about delegation for a real thing. Is that something that came easy to you?
Yeah, I have because I can't do it all. I'm a huge Star Wars buff, and I look for different leadership lessons and everything. There's a scene where Princess Leia tells Darth Vader and I think Grand Moff Tarkin that the harder that he squeezes his hand, that more systems will actually fall out of it. And Vader and Moff and the Emperor, they are trying to take over the universe. And that's a leadership lesson, that you can't do everything. And you have to give power out. You have to empower everybody around you to like go do this stuff. So
you have to have a relationship with them to have empower, right? That gets right back to people are central.
Now you're in my wheelhouse. This is relationships are everything. I have a weekly one-on-one with my direct reports. I know the names of their wives, of their kids, and each week I ask about them, because if they know that Brian cares, and Brian does care, this isn't just a job, it's a calling. And so you need to be able to invest in them. So I work really hard on relationships, and yet having good relationships. It doesn't mean that like everybody is happy with every decision that I make. I just had to make some different decisions last week due to like COVID. And I know that like everybody isn't happy, but I've invested enough in them that even if they disagree with me, they will still follow me and they still believe in the organization.
Yeah, no, that's key. You can't lead anybody, and you can't get anybody to buy into what you're saying unless you have the respect, and that takes being present. And I think that's what you just gave a really great example of, being present on those one-on-ones. It's not just about running through the numbers or what have you done for me lately. We've taken a deep breath. We know each other. We're human beings. Let's be present for a moment. Let's have a well-rounded conversation that drives your whole life forward, right? Because this is bigger than the job. I love it. I got that really jumped out at me in the book. I love the short little chapters and like real punches of human, human concentration that you have are really impactful, because I think that's not addressed so much. It's the tactics and the how-tos, and it's really people. People's my wheelhouse too. I'm in the tech business. And my little saying, which might catch on soon before somebody else does it, on top of me, is the next technological revolution is people. 100%. We have enough technology. We have enough ability to create technology and innovate. It's really about people that are going to bring along whatever the next revolution is. It'll include a lot of technology, obviously, but it's people.
I can't agree. Yeah. And we're in the tech business as well. Radio, apps, online listening, websites, and we are drowning in this. And it isn't about the platform. It's about the people. It's about and you have to produce content. And I hate to say produce content. I'd like to say that you have to create experiences. Anybody can create content. Anybody can do it. But does that content suck? And that content has to be at a level to where it creates such a great experience that you inspire them, and now they are engaging with you. So to me, yeah, you're right. It's all about the people.
And authenticity you touched on there with content not being, not sucking. It has to be palatable. That's one thing, right? And anybody can make palatable content, but if it's not unique, it's not gonna stand out. And being authentic is the best way to be unique, because we're all individuals. Everybody's special. So if you let yourself shine, you're gonna stand out. If you try to let the corporate deck shine, you're not gonna stand out. So
I write a lot about authenticity, and I try to be very authentic. To anybody who is listening to this podcast who wants to be a leader, or yet you are a leader, you had better be authentic. Let me define what I mean by that. If you screw up as a leader, apologize. You want to know why? Because your team already knows that you did screw up. The worst thing you can do as a leader is to try and just ignore it and to put it under the rug, because you're teaching them to hide problems from you. And so you have to be the example of, hey, I screwed up. This is what I did. And that they will respect you, and you set the example for them. So authenticity is, and they should know that, like, you are struggling on certain things. Hey guys, I haven't made a decision over here. I'm struggling with this. They should know that. So be yourself. Don't be somebody else.
now, you said that you get some flack for not bringing, the Bible and Jesus into your leadership writing, but I really like the in the chapter Leadership Matters, in Leadership Endurance. I really liked your response to that. The Bible's a book about redemption and what God does. Of course, there's great leaders in there, and I'm going to ask you a question: what you think about some of these leadership books that do stem from biblical references. But your example, your explanation there was really great, Brian, and you capped it off with, yeah, sure, there's great leaders throughout the Bible, and you referenced a couple of them, but you end it with, God gives you examples. Don't miss them. And that has been the theme of 2021 for Joe, as I've been trying to figure some things out and have, through working with other men, other people that taught me how to be better leaders within my home. The theme of being an example rather than having all the information has just been so prominent that stuck out at me. And I think that's a really good, reason to lean on what and the examples that you can show that aren't just embedded in the book. Right. So that's a really good frame you put on it.
Yeah. I would say, the Bible is a book about redemption from the first page to the last. It's all about Jesus. It's about our falling into sin and about him coming. And when we start to make the Bible something else, we start to abuse it, and we start to manipulate it. Now, are there great leaders in the Bible? Yes. Do I write about them? Yes. But they are written about to where you see their successes are a result of God, and their failures are because God can redeem them. David had an affair, murdered a guy, put together a gang of folks. They went out and murdered a whole bunch of other folks. I mean, but then he becomes king and he's called friend of God, and he wrote the Psalms. First of all, think about this. He would not get hired on a church staff today. I find that intriguing, but there is that. So the Bible is, so here's it. So David's story wasn't written to be a leadership principle. It was written to show this is what God can do with you if you screw up. Yep. That's the point. Now, I can write about leadership stuff from David, but I want to keep the main thing, so that I don't mislead people about what the Bible's about. And that's just me being protective of the gospel message, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm in Philadelphia, so we had a gentleman by the name of Andy Reid in our life for the better part.
Oh, yes, you did.
Yeah, and reading, listening, because I did the audio version, listening to your style, from your leadership style, what you just said there about keep what's important, or what what we're talking about, keep it there, however you said it. That's I started thinking Andy Reid, right? Your organization, you go through being prepared, right? And going through things, having those financial, because he had that big chart and a dinner menu with every single thing on there, and he was very well known for his meticulous organization and being a very principled individual. And I think of that as kind of old school sometimes. But I tried to go there with you when I was like, Brian's old school, but I didn't feel that, right? I just felt, you're kind of sturdy, and it's kind of views like that made Andy Reid come to mind. I hope you see that as a really good.
Well, I don't know if it's old school. I say that it's more like Mandalorian, that like, this is the way, that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I kind of am that way too. But isn't there some times where you have to find yourself not being stuck in the mud when it comes to the way we? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yes. And I was talking to my wife last night about how an organization is like putting pottery on a wheel, or else you put clay on a wheel, and you're trying to like shape it, and so you're pouring water on it constantly. So you have to be constantly changing and shaping that, and yet molding it. This is the problem, is we think that we form the perfect organization, and we pick up that piece of pottery and we put it on the shelf, and over time it's going to get hard, it's going to crack, it's going to crumble. So you can't get stuck in your ways. You have to keep it on the wheel. You keep learning, you keep reading. I try to read about 52 books a year so that my mind can stay pliable. I can keep reading, I can keep learning. And so you're exactly, so it isn't that I'm trying to be stuck in the mud or I'm trying to be old school. What I'm trying to say is, here are some principles. Here are some things that have worked and will work. Because here's one thing, people will always be people. You're going to have to lead people. If you want to start a business, a church, a ministry, you're going to have to deal with people.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
How do you deal with them? So that's what leadership is. It's all about leading people and influencing them.
And the reason I got onto that is because by leading, you have to you have to be the example, right? So God gives leaders, so that other people have examples on how to lead and how to do better at what they do, right? Because they need a leader, and that's your job, is to be an example. And you have to, you can't let the wind blow you off a principle. But at the same time, the world is changing, right? You're in the media business. How long have you been at PAR? I read a little bit about your background, and you talk about it, I think, at the beginning of the book. Tell me a little bit about PAR. I'm very interested in what y'all are doing.
We came here in 2004 from New Orleans, where I was with New Orleans Seminary, and their station, WBSN, left there, and I came here and PAR, we have 5 terrestrial networks, 5 different brands on the air across 7 states. Weekly average cume for we have about 1 million people who will actually who listen to us each week. Then we have brands online. We have a Positive Gold, which is like hits from the 90s. We have a 24/7 Christmas station, which actually has listeners every single day of the year, which just amazes me. So we do that. We have podcasts. Me and my wife have a podcast. Each of the different brands have a podcast. They all have different social media pages. I've written 2 books. So we do a lot. And let me say this, and we exist and breathe to inspire people to follow Jesus Christ. And so our mission statement is that we create and deliver experiences that inspire people to follow Jesus. And that's how we think we can actually change the world. That's how we.
Yeah. And you're probably sharing really good examples. That's what those experiences are. What type of experiences am I gonna run in? Like, what type of experiences will I run into if I run into PAR on one of your outlets?
You're going to run into great music. You will run into us trying to encourage you. We will.
Let me stop you there, Brian. Because on the what do you mean on the encouragement part is, and because I get you what it means, great music, right? Like the ministry is in the delivery, right? I totally get it. But what do you mean by that comment? Will inspire you.
When I say that, or to encourage you, what I'll say is we encourage our team to actually reflect their lives on air.
Good.
So that, and this is in our podcast, this is in things that we write, because things that like I'm going through, you're probably going through. And it's in that sharing, and yet it is in that struggle, and yet it is in that victory that we hope people will see the hand of God at work in their own life.
Oh, so glad I stopped you there, because so close to home. I serve on our production team at a church, and last night we huddle up and we get things out in the air. Anybody need a prayer? Anybody need to talk to anything? And without fail, every week there's people that speak up, and it is just you watch energy and people just flow to them. It's not just the prayer for the person; it's actually what happens after that, the connections that are made. Here's somebody that I hadn't really met yet that I was able to share my experiences with, because we happen to share a situation she's going through. And that is such a gift, right? And that's the type of encouragement we need. And I was able to offer some encouragement and some perspective, and invite her into my life, as it were, to talk about this at any time. That's huge. And if that's what you're doing in terms of experiences and how you're encouraging people, that's really the new thing, right? That's what people are kind of catching up to. Like I said, technology is all there, and it sounds like you're taking advantage of a lot of it. You're not missing out on the new and improved stuff. Maybe we could have another philosophical conversation on that. But no, being authentic is the new flash, whiz flash, exciting thing people want to see. They don't want manicured. They don't want scripted. They want actual real people. And I think they don't even care about celebrities. I have this thing where, celebrities are done because there's just way too many outlets of interesting people that, celebrity was an exclusive. If the word celebrity is an exclusive rarefied air or whatever you want to say, that's gone, because everybody's so interesting and we're all connected to each other right now. By default, everybody's a celebrity. So the term goes away.
Yeah, I think the days of like Sinatra and all that are gone, where you could walk into a restaurant. Oh my, there's a true Johnny Carson. Those days are gone. Those days are behind us. But you're right. I mean, I need to admit that Brian isn't perfect. I make bad calls all the time. I never thought that reality TV would still be here. Like You're watching normal everyday people do what? And it's a hit. And here we are with it. Like Survivor is in its what, 25th year? I mean, who really? Jeff Probst still has a job. This far in, he still has a job. Really? And I just so that also tells me this, is that there's a hunger for really good stories. And this could be unfair. This could actually be unfair. I've never said this publicly, so this might be a huge debate. I wonder if the rise of reality TV is due to a lack of interesting and yet original stories that could be written. Look at movies. There is, most of them are like like sequels or even remakes. Somebody,
Hollywood,
write a story.
Hollywood's a great example of no leadership in exist. There's not a leader to be found, right? Because what do leaders do? They take risks, and Hollywood is not going to take a risk. They just keep retreading old material that they know is going to hit. Ghostbusters 53, I think, is coming out this winter or something like that, right? Yeah, I feel you, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think Jeff Probst, if he wants to make money after they decide to finally cancel Survivor, if he wants to make money, it's going to be on the internet showing people, who Jeff Probst is, right? Because nobody knows who he is. He's the well manicured, and I don't mean anything against him, right?
Yeah.
Pretty face that traditionally you would put in the head of a show like that. And now reality TV is maybe more akin to my experience. This is a conversation. I'm not saying to know it all, but I spend a lot of time when I have a few minutes consuming random guitar players on YouTube who are giving their personality, right? That's reality TV in itself, right? They're just turning on a camera and being their quirky self. And it's the thing that I'm into right now. I just love, seeing these unique individuals and how they approach their instrument.
I never would have thought that I'd do this, but it was a number of years ago. And somebody says, yeah, I follow this channel over on YouTube. And I was like, well, how do you follow a channel on YouTube and what does this? I just thought it was random people going to a concert, recording something, throwing it up on the internet. Well, today I follow a guy who does bass fishing because I like to fish, and my dad was a huge bass fisherman. I also follow there's a family out of Florida they are Disney nerds, and me and my wife love Disney. We watch their channel. We watch their videos. There's a guy that's in Canada who does all these trips around the world, and he puts out these little 25-minute videos of his trips, and and he shows you trains and airplanes and that kind of stuff. I find that stuff so like I'm watching stuff on YouTube that I never would have thought before. So, and it's interesting content, and these people are real, and here's what's interesting is that they're drawing me into their life, and like, you may not be able to do this, but yet you can live it through me. So I find that interesting.
And it's usually a two-way conversation, right? Continue the conversation on Twitter. Maybe there's, the comment section going below. On some of these other platforms like Twitch, it is very interactive. So you're not just observing it all and vicariously living through them, you're living with them. You're actually a part of that community. Yeah, no, it's a changing world, isn't it, Brian? I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I feel like I'm blessed to have like my foot firmly planted in the pre-cell phone, pre-internet everything. I ran through the Dewey Decimal System. There's not too many generations after me, maybe just one, right? If any, that actually have that experience, because it's a much different, much slower, much more confined experience that your life was. But now you're exposed to everybody, and in turn, everybody's exposed to you, right? So you do have more accountability as a person nowadays. You have to be your own leader because you can't just exist in your 250 person community bubble. You got a group at church, you got a group at work, you got your family, and that might be it your whole life, right?
Mm.
Now, whether you like it or not, if you want to relate to people, it's on the internet, right? And it is. Hopefully, you're being healthy about it, and you got your foot in the metaverse and the universe. But Facebook is the metaverse. Twitter, where we met, that's the metaverse for all intents and purposes, right? So you have to embrace it to some extent, and part of that is the exposure. Every tweet, everything that you put out can potentially see every eye, right? That has a digital device in their hand, and almost everybody does. So there's a lot more accountability there as an individual. So let me ask you this: you said not everybody's called to be a leader, I think, or something to that extent, like knowing when you're not a leader. But like, let's play with my little thought there about everybody having to be a leader in this new world. How does that resonate with you? Because now you have to lead yourself because you're exposed, and to make it in the world, you're going to have to leverage that different type of exposure.
Let me answer this question two ways. One, I don't
Yeah.
think everybody is called to be a leader of an organization. Okay, so let me say that. Two, everybody has to lead. You have to make choices. You have a family. You have to make choices about money. You have to make choices about church. So about kids. So you have to lead. What I am going to say is this: you need to be grounded into what your purpose is. Why are you here? What are your skills? Um, why do you think, for me, God put us here? So, and so if I believe these certain things, then how do I lead, shape, guide, shepherd people toward that goal? How does my money, is it reflecting that this goal is actually important to me? So there's, so to me, so yes, everybody is a leader in that sense, but not in the sense of being an organization. I want to go back to something that you said a minute ago about metaverse. I think that the metaverse is so large now that we're losing ourselves in it. A part of what I try to do is to help people give meaning. You're going to spend a third of your life at work. You spend a third of your life asleep, and usually a third at work. That's a huge chunk of your life. Well, wherever you work, it needs to speak to meaning. Why are you here? And as a leader, I want to connect, why were you created, and how is that connected to what you do? Because if I can do that, you will see your life, your work from a whole new perspective. And that will help motivate you. It will help you get out of bed in the morning. Now, you will still be grumpy on days. You will still be aggravated on days. There will be days when you're not motivated. But at least it's in your mind that I was made to do this. I am gifted to do this. And this gives me meaning. Because how many people go to a job every day that they hate? How many people go there just to earn a paycheck? I mean, and listen, I realize that that's real for a lot of people, but I would have to change my life. I'd have to figure out a way to where my life had, and this is awful to say, but I need a bigger purpose, if that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense. It's the reason we're talking today. I found myself in a personality conflict or crisis of character by spending so much time climbing corporate ladders and trying to reach certain levels of career achievement. And that had me putting people in front of, meaning, right? I wanted to be part of certain crowds, fit into certain things to get certain things that I had, put as the meaning. So I think you're absolutely right. That can work for a little while, but not really work, because you do start to break down. And once you find out you don't know who you are, good luck, right? Because you've just been handed, pretty difficult task, that you could have been working on, incrementally, through the process, if you had your meaning on there, meaning tagged onto the front, right? So I think that's huge, Brian. What do you mean by we're getting lost in the metaverse, though? You said we're spending 2/3 of our time at work and asleep. You saying that we need to maximize, the time that we have, awake, not getting lost in the metaverse. And what do you mean by that? Yeah.
That the internet is good and all these different social media platforms are good. They can be used for good. I think it's also exposed how it can hurt us. The whole comparison game, um,
Absolutely.
bullying,
Mhm.
just uh, the number of passive aggressive comments, division. Uh, it's just, I think, I don't want to say this. We've lost a civil identity at some point. And if my dad was alive today, he would say that the internet gave every fool a microphone. And I'm not saying that like, uh, and this would be his point. There might be some ideas that people need to keep to themselves, So, and we read something and we react to it, it gets everybody else upset. Just so I think we're losing ourselves in it with like our personal identity. For example, you actually post something, you're like, oh, I only got 50 likes. And yesterday I got like 150 likes. And so you take a hit on your self-worth. We got to figure out how to not identify ourselves by the number of people who hit a like button. Does that, you know what I'm saying?
No, Brian, I'm really glad I asked that question. I love the answer. We have people like you pulling people into that new reality. Because I want to give you a quick story from my day to day that, the words of Brian popped in my head. Why I had a little bit of a conflict. Not really conflict. The conflict was I was about to spend time in the metaverse where I needed to make a phone call. All right. And, the chapter, I don't remember what it was, but you talk about, if you're going to be present with your people, or if you need to praise somebody, I think it was praise, call them. Don't hand out, congratulations or praise, or don't check in with somebody that you need to have that that you just need to check in with. Don't ever do a text. Don't ever do an email. Like, you're pretty adamant about that. When you were just speaking, I was thinking about what the internet has opened up is we can get gratification really easily. So, I'm yelling into the microphone. I'm gratified. I don't have to work on me anymore, right? I don't have to find out what my meaning is, because that kind of felt good. I mean, where's the Bud Light, right?
Right.
And yeah, so this morning, I had to make a phone call, but I was drawn at first to text, and I stopped. I said, no, I shouldn't text. And then Brian comes in my head. This is an important call I had to make, right? Um, don't text. Pick up the phone and call. Picked up the phone and called, and not only did I call, he picked up, and we had a great conversation. And I was an example, I hope, in that phone call, as a result of how I brought myself into it, and how we ended it. So yeah, the leadership principles just kind of come out everywhere you are. Everywhere you land, if you are living with purpose and meaning, if you know who you are and you have that kind of pinned to your chest, and if your why's clear, you can't help but lead, because you're going to make all your decisions based off that higher goal. And if it's the right higher goal, you're going to want to elevate everybody around you to help you get there, and to help them get where they're going. So, not to pontificate, but that was my direct experience, and a thank you, right? Because that's why we share our talents, is to have an impact on other people. And I think you said it right. How do you And it wasn't inspire. What was it? Like how do you,
You
you
want
said
to,
that your program doesn't inspire, you give examples or,
well, we want to create and deliver experiences that inspire people.
inspire. Yeah. So that's exactly what you do. You share your authentic talent, which you did in your book. And I was able to take your authenticity and go ahead and take it into my life. If you're not being authentic in that moment, Brian, I don't pick up that message, right? You were
Right.
adamant about that point. Brian kind of popped out from behind the microphone doing his read and was like, "Hey, Joe, now I'm talking to you," right? And that was because it was something really important to you.
I would say this, and this is going to sound harsh, but cowards often hide behind a keyboard because we don't want to have a hard conversation. We don't want to have conflict. And so we try to avoid it. Uh, but if you'll have a conversation, ask some questions, and speak truth, you'll find that usually that things will work out in the end. Especially if you send a text, people can read tone into it. And that can lead to all kind of problems. You send an email and you put an exclamation point at the end. Well, does that mean you're angry or does that mean you're excited? So, but if you pick up the phone and call, or else you have a Zoom, or you do a face-to-face conversation, there is no room for anything to be misunderstood. Usually, now I'm not going to say they won't leave being misunderstood, but usually things are a lot more clear in an actual conversation than they are on text. So,
And there's that cadence to the real universe that you're not going to get in a digital communication. In the sales profession, you probably could speak to this too, Brian. You can't get the same things done over persistent Zoom relationships, right? At some point, you need to be in the same room with somebody because it's not always the end of the half hour, right? Or, even though we're looking at each other, there's enough separation where you can hide behind not being able to see. It's not hiding behind something. It's like, well, the guy on the other end or the gal on the other end really doesn't see your facial expression because their eyes weren't on you, right? They got an email that clicked over here, right? Or they were checking to see if they have something in their teeth, right? So you're actually not getting via Zoom these really crucial moments that help you stop conversations from progressing because we haven't solved an issue yet, right? So that's one of the biggest things that I'm seeing in terms of being able to get out in front of people when you can. And, I'm trying to slow things down and make sure that we're hitting the points and we're hitting them thoroughly rather than moving past them, because you have to be a little bit more deliberate about it if you're doing it over Zoom.
yeah, we're still well, having different brands across 7 states. We use Zoom a good bit because we're not all in one building. I used to bring the leadership team into Blacksburg, Virginia, where our headquarters are, about once a quarter. And it's in those one-on-one, and it's in those group settings that you find innovation, that you have a side conversation and you tell somebody, bring that up to the group. My fear is how much innovation have we lost in the last 2 years? Now it's out of our hands. There's a pandemic and a virus and everything else, and guidance and everything else. But still, how do you try to encourage innovation in this time? And this is what I'll say: you have to ask more pointed questions, and you have to give people time to actually answer those questions, because they're not in a room with other people feeding off of that energy, feeding off of stuff. You need to give them time to actually think and go back and read other people's responses. So I think that, like, innovation has been hurt. I still think you can do it. Probably not just on this, but it it won't be at the same scale as it was before.
Yeah, well, this taps into, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but Gen Z is going to be digital. The kids that are going to be, coming into their 20s, I guess now or so, the ones after millennials, they're going to be digital first, right? And there is a lot of utility in being able to be efficient with having digital communication, and a lot of that's textual in different collaboration platforms that are, better than, maybe some of the social media things, but like, Slack is maybe asynchronous chat, right? Having multiple conversations, being able to have a, a conversation with, an individual here via text, but right below it is like your executive leadership group, and it's all textual relationship. You're just hopping back and forth very quickly. So, there's utility that you can innovate well, but if other people, if the generation that didn't grow up digitally, right, and the ones that just got forced into Zoom, because there's a lot of them, right, even though Zoom and these ways have been around for a while, they're still catching up, right? So I think I really like your point. The metaverse cannot take over us, but I think you agree with me that it's here and we need to manage it properly.
Yeah. And I think it's just like all new things. You have to learn how to manage it. And I
What's
still, and I don't have the answer for that yet.
what's Blacksburg like?
Seated in the Blue Ridge Mountains, I could throw from my window, I could throw a rock to the gates of Virginia Tech. 45,000 students. So we are a college town.
Okay.
It's a beautiful area. We actually built a house on the side of a mountain, and our back deck overlooks a valley. So it's a probably with like students here, we probably run 125,000 people. When they're not here, it's glorious. You can get places faster. You can go to restaurants faster. But it's a small, quaint. It still has a downtown feel, like a Norman Rockwell painting. What I like to say is, my wife made me endure Gilmore Girls, and it's actually a pretty good TV series. But this is like Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls. It has all those personalities and that kind of stuff. So it's fun.
Are you guys seeing a migration of people out of cities into Blacksburg? Did they make it out to you?
There is a large. We are seeing a number of retirement communities actually pop up here. So we are seeing that happen.
Yeah, I live the suburbs of Philadelphia, and we have these boroughs, but they're probably like these small Blacksburgs, but it just happens to be 45 minutes away from Philadelphia, or a couple hours away from New York. So we've seen a lot of people leaving the cities and coming out to these boroughs that are turning into little cities, and a little bit more exciting. Even with everything going on, there's this building everywhere. It reminds me of 2009, 10 and 11, where all the building, well, before that, right? There was lots of building going on, 5, 6, 7, 8. But it's the changing atmosphere that we're living in the universe. Because of the metaverse, people can go out and get the beautiful Blacksburg and work their corporate job, because they don't have to be close to a major airport anymore, right? And for the foreseeable future, I'm only going to be traveling a handful of times a year, maybe. So let me go live in Blacksburg, see what's up, right? I'm going to retire in a handful of years anyway, live in a 55 plus, or one of those situations. So do you see that changing the do you think about that at all? Because I do. I think it's a great opportunity for innovation, because if you bring these people together, and you create new good communities, and if tech is everywhere and people learn how to use tech to get their voice out there, their authentic voice out there, now you got a little innovation city, right, where everybody's innovating left and right to figure out how to do a better job being themselves. So if everybody's making a living being in the metaverse, I don't want to go too far, Brian, right? And I don't prescribe to that, but again, it's changing the way we operate, and people need to be authentic. And I think innovation is going to come from that, if people get together and talk about how to improve these new ways of doing things.
Yeah, let me say this. I don't think like that. So let me say that isn't my gift set. What I would say is that I would let you build the borough. Now this is how I think. Now, how does Brian get the gospel into that borough? What do I have to do? Is there a station? Is there a podcast I could do that is exclusive about that borough, about events and things going on, and then pepper it with like gospel-centered principles? that would point people to Jesus. So that's how I'm going to look at that. So I don't. I guess that perhaps I'm just a true Gen Xer now. That we live in a suburb. We live in a two-story house, and we just remodeled it, which thank God we survived. Uh, but I don't ever see us moving into a 55 plus community. We might one day. Who knows? I get tired of the ice and snow. Who knows? We may pack up and move down to Florida. But this is home. This is where we are. So I don't think like that. But yet, how I do think is, where are people going? And yet, how do we get the gospel to them?
So if they're coming to Blacksburg, I
Come to
hope that you're able
Blacksburg.
to, you better get the gospel to them, Brian.
Yeah,
Because
that's what I have
yeah,
to do.
yeah. Do you have outlets in Blacksburg with?
Oh yes, oh yes, oh
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. Do
yes.
you are you a local celebrity, Brian?
No, I try not to be a celebrity. Uh, there are fan moments, like with me and my wife, and
Yeah.
I actually wrote the first book, and it hit a #1 status, and so we did a tour, and we did a nationwide tour. Well, we were trying to do a nationwide tour. We did Nashville, we did New Orleans, we had stuff booked in Atlanta, and you speak, and then all these people line up to shake your hand and like sign their book. and and these people are treating you like you're a celebrity, and I'm just like, bro, I am just a rugged, ragged fella, no different than you. All I did was just write something. How I wrote a book is, I wrote a page and a half a day for a year. That's how I wrote a book. That's all I did. And I'm no celebrity. But now people will have fanboy moments, like they will find you. Oh, you're Brian Sanders. Yeah, who are you? What? Who are you, and why are you here? Because I don't see me in that realm, in that light at all. And my wife, because of the podcast, she had her first fangirl moment the other day, where some people who listen to our podcast, who we've never met and who love the podcast, came up to her, and it really kind of wigged her out a little bit. She said, "Is this what it's like?" And I said, "Well, I've only had it happen to me like maybe 50 times. I guess it's what it's like." So yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask you to take that as a sign, because maybe maybe that's a new way to lead. I think that's really cool, that people are coming up to you, and now you have an opportunity to touch somebody else's life that you wouldn't have, because they're stepping out of their comfort zone or doing whatever to engage you, right? So that should be a real nice gift.
Well, we will try, and we will try to use it wisely.
As long as you don't get 50 a day, I can see how that would get in the way of productivity.
I'm not a, I'm not, yeah, I'm not a fan. I mean, it's fine, it's good, but it's not something that I would want every single day.
No, and I think, like we were talking about before, celebrity's over, right? People want to do their thing and move on, right? Like, I think that's over. People won't even want to be celebrities anymore, let alone them not existing. So I know we're running out of time, and I see that bust of, I think that's Lincoln maybe behind you on the other end.
Yes,
Did you
yes.
just get that?
No,
Okay.
I've got Lincoln there. I've got Lincoln over there. I got 3 pictures of Lincoln. He is my hero.
I figured that. I really appreciate your sharing of Lincoln in the book. How'd you come to be a fan of Lincoln and admire him so much?
Oh, if you want to become a fan of Lincoln, you should read a book called Forged in Crisis by Nancy Kane.
Okay.
Incredible book. I'm a leader, but I'm also a human. I'm a leader. I also have clay feet, and I have flaws and foibles. I'm a leader, but I also have insecurities. Lincoln, for all of his greatness, they had to hide knives and scissors from him out of fear that he would take his own life because of the stress he was under. And that raised my eyebrow. Not that I ever think about suicide. But I'm like, here's a guy who did something great, but he's got a flaw. And then you start reading about Lincoln and you realize these other flaws that he has. And because here's the thing, Brian can't be perfect. There was only one perfect person, and he died for the rest of us who are imperfect. So I'm looking for imperfect people who did great things and what I can learn from them. And Abraham Lincoln is a great example of an imperfect person who did great things. He should have fired multiple generals, but he was too patient. He had a temper, and he'd want to fire off a letter to somebody, and he'd put that in, and then he'd pause, and he wouldn't send the letter. How many times do we get angry and we want to fire off a text?
And we do, and that's what people need to learn, right? Yeah.
I mean, and Lincoln is a great example to step back and take a pause and breathe. So he was he's also an example of somebody who failed multiple times, but eventually reached a goal. So he's a hero.
Yeah, it was really very enjoyable to hear you talk about him and write about him. It was, again, the authenticity jumped off the page or into my ears from the microphone, because I could really sense that you had an admiration for him. Oh. And the bus back there, definitely, and your description of all the other pictures, icing on the cake. How do you want to wrap up? I'm interested in the Peas and Carrots podcast. I think we could talk forever. I'd love to talk to you again if you're open to it, Brian. But what do you want to end with here? Do you want to talk about Peas and Carrots? What do you want to do? I'm open.
Let me say this. You can go to Amazon. You can look me up. I have 2 books, Leadership Endurance, which is the leadership book. And then there's the book also, Be Like Dad, which is a book about my dad. We lost him about 3 years ago to cancer. And there's 50 stories in that book about leadership principles that my dad taught me, but I share them through story form. And so that was a way to honor my dad, but also a way to infuse leadership principles. Also, my wife, Kayla, and we have a podcast called the Peas and Carrots Podcast. And we talk about life. We talk about our faith. We talk about struggles, insecurities, stuff that's happening in the news. So, yeah, I'd encourage you to go check out the Peas and Carrots podcast. But always, let me say this: stick with Joe, hit like, and also subscribe to the Meaningcast podcast. Well, Joe, thank you for this time. It's been an honor, brother. I mean, it's an honor. Thank you.
No, Brian, it was a really good conversation, sincerely. And people will come and go to podcasts, and they'll be there for a while. They get what they need, and they move on to make room for the next person, right? I think this is all meaningful work that we're doing. If you're putting yourself out there for the right reason, the right people will find you. And it's digital, so they have time, right? So I appreciate that. And let's just have a great rest of the day, Brian. I really appreciate you coming on. This was really fun.
If you want to make money, you have to get paid at scale. Why you? That's accountability. At scale, that's leverage. You getting paid as opposed to somebody else getting paid, that's specific knowledge. That's specific knowledge. Feels like play to me. Specific knowledge. But it looks like work to others. Specific knowledge. Feels like play to me. Specific knowledge. But it looks like work to others. We have this idea that everything can be taught. Everything can be taught in school. And it's not true that everything can be taught. In fact, the most interesting things cannot be taught. But everything can be learned. But everything can be learned. Very often that learning either comes from some innate characteristics in your DNA, or could be through your childhood where you learn soft skills, which are very, very hard to teach later on in life. Or it's something that is brand new, so nobody else knows how to do it either. Or it's true on-the-job training because you're pattern matching into a highly complex environment. Specific knowledge is the knowledge that you care about, especially if you're later in life. Let's say you're post 20, 21, 22. You almost don't get to choose which specific knowledge you have. Rather, you get to look at what you have already built by that point in time, and then you can build on top of it. The first thing to notice about specific knowledge is that you can't be trained for it. If you can be trained for it, if you can go to a class and learn specific knowledge, then somebody else can be trained for it too. And then we can mass produce and mass train people. Heck, we can even program computers to do it. And eventually we can program robots to walk around doing it. So if that's the case, then you're extremely replaceable, and all we have to pay you is the minimum wage that we have to pay you to get you to do it, when there are lots of other takers who can be trained to do it. That's specific knowledge. Feels like play to me. Specific knowledge. But it looks like work to others. Specific knowledge. Feels like play to me. Specific knowledge. But it looks like work to others. Specific knowledge is found much more by pursuing your innate talents, your genuine curiosity, and your passion. Very often, specific knowledge is at the edge of knowledge. It's also stuff that's just being figured out or is really hard to figure out. So if you're not 100% into it, somebody else who is 100% into it will outperform you. And they won't just outperform you by a little bit, they'll outperform you by a lot. Because now we're operating the domain of ideas, compound interest really applies and leverage really applies. If you're operating with 1,000 times leverage and somebody is right 80% of the time and somebody else is right 90% of the time, the person who's right 90% of the time will literally get paid hundreds of times more by the market. So very often, it's not something you sit down and you reason about. It's more found by observation. You almost have to look back on your own life and see what you're actually good at. I wanted to be a scientist. The first person to actually point out my real specific knowledge was my mother. I was like 15 or 16 years old. I was telling a friend of mine that I wanted to be an astrophysicist, and she said, "No, you're going to go into business." And I was like, "What? My mom's telling me I'm going to be in business? I'm going to be an astrophysicist. Mom doesn't know what she's talking about." But Mom knew exactly what she was talking about. She had already observed. We walked down the street. I would critique the local pizza parlor on why they were selling their slices a certain way with certain toppings and why their process of ordering was this way when it should have been that way. So she knew that I had more of a business curious mind, but then my obsession with science combined to create technology and technology businesses where I found myself. That's specific knowledge. Feels like play to me. Specific knowledge. But it looks like work to others. That's specific knowledge. Feels like play to me. Specific knowledge. But it looks like work to others. So very often, your specific knowledge is observed and often observed by other people who know you well and revealed in situations rather than something that you come up with.